Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. We are going through Louis Sullivan's System of Architectural Ornament. This is our final meetup in the series. This is not the final meetup on Louis Sullivan. We've done more than, I think, close to 50 meetups now on Louis Sullivan. And next year is his 100th anniversary. So we'll have to figure out what to do for the 100th.
We will not live, I think, to see the last Shrikant Sullivan meetup.
Yeah. Wonderful. All right. So today we are going to focus on the last set of plates.
Can I make one correction there? It's
Please.
the 100th anniversary of his death.
Oh, 100th anniversary of his death. Yes.
Not his birthday. Yeah.
Yes. So thank you. All right. So we're going to start with Sherri talking about the plates, and then Rob will make a comment on one of the plates. And then we're going to go to Rupali. Then I'll have some comments, and then we'll open it up for everybody. Sherri has given us the assignment of trying to reproduce one of these plates within 5 minutes. That was the assignment. But I'm sure some of us have worked on it. So let's get started. Sherri, go ahead.
Okay, so I wanted to start my part here from one of the paragraphs at the end of our interlude. This is where we have the little essay, one-page essay on parallelism. And I think it's the second to last paragraph. We talked about this last time. I mentioned it at the end of my part last time, but I want to start with it this time. And the paragraph reads, such a process may proceed either way, as a sentient development on an intellectual background, or as an intellectual development on a sentient background. The illustrations may be traced back to their primitive origins, or the primitive origins may be followed in their expanding development. Excuse me, I'm a little cough today. So I want to take a look at the plates. And the very last paragraph of that essay, he talks about plates 7 and 8. And we talked about those a little bit last time. So I would like to take a step through plates 10 through 20. And I'm not going to go into the deepest details. I'm really eager to see what Rupali does about breaking it down from its full form down to its simplified form. But I just want to bring up some details to help you start seeing that process if you haven't done the homework yourself already. So I'm going to share screen on my iPad next to me here, and then I can draw while we talk. So Shrikant, if you want to pin this would be a good time. And I'm going to pull up. Oh, I thought I already had it up. Here we are. Let me get to the right plate. There we are, plate 10. So this allows me to flow through the plates. These are photographs from an original copy at the University of Virginia's library. So you can see you're getting the drawings on that nice, rich, warm colored paper, that cotton paper. And doing this will allow me to zoom in and get into some really close detail. And I can also draw right on the drawings. Not that I'm actually drawing on the original, it's just on the screen. So we can walk ourselves through a few of these things. So let's think about what Sullivan's talking about here. This is his introduction to these last 10 plates. And he's telling us that we can trace the illustrations back to their primitive origins, or we can follow the primitive origins to their expanding development. So with that in mind, I know the homework assignment was to take these completed plates and follow them back. I'm just going to take this opportunity to kind of draw out a few things I'm seeing in the plates. And hopefully that will bring more detail and more richness of your appreciation of them. So in this particular one, I see that we have a very distinct vertical axis. And if you look carefully, you can even see that pencil line drawn straight through the drawing, which I don't know, maybe you didn't see that before. He actually has that line.
Wait a minute.
Look, you see it?
Damn, I can see it now.
Right,
okay, I missed
straight
that before.
Through, there is a pencil line.
He has a cross line.
He has a cross line coming across here too.
Yeah, okay.
But what I love about this one, we definitely have started with this vertical line, and we definitely have this very distinct circular pattern in the center. But what this really reminds me of is what happens with this vertical line and these two growth shapes that come from it. We have one that grows this way, and we have one that grows the opposite way. And upside down, it kind of looks like a treble clef or an ampersand. But the other thing that it really looks like, Rob and I were talking about this earlier, is it looks a little like a caduceus, you know, where you have the staff and the snakes that wrap around it. And if I pull these lines back away, you'll start seeing it yourself. And you start seeing that wrapping form, that one of them wraps in front and then goes behind, and the other starts behind and then grows in front. So you have that very wrapping shape happening. There's a lot more detail in here, but I'm trying to just point out a couple things on each of the plates to really give you that sense of what's happening, and encourage you to dive more deeply into each of them. The other thing that I really love about this one is this little set of little seed pods. Each one has its own little thing that grows off it, kind of like an unfurling fern frond. You know, there's like these little coils that come off of each of one, and you have the same kind of coiling, twisting shape that happens here. Then I'm going to go on to number 11. This is plate 11. And this one, again, you can see there's a little line across through here. There's one across through here. And there's a faint one. You can't really see it here. Right across through there.
That's basically the shape he began with.
This is the shape he began with. You can see the pencil. Often you can see his construction lines in the back. And he could have erased them if he wanted to. But of course, this is a teaching thing too. So if you look closely, you see some pencil lines here. You see pencil lines, these curves here. So he's giving us our direction. But the other thing that I love about this one is remember that essay that we just read was about parallelism. And to me, this looks like the first step in one of these parallelisms. So with our vertical line and our horizontal line, and we've got these extra parallel lines there, and this patterning that happens here and here. So if I shrink it down and scoot it, oops, I got to turn that off first. Scoot it over, I can shrink it down, scoot it over. I can see a whole nother parallel coming through here, another circle up here, another line through, and another set of diamonds, that this whole thing is duplicated over again. So
you can definitely see him using that.
You can see that yeah, he definitely used that on a frieze. The other thing that I think is really interesting about this one is we have an awful lot of the geometric in this one. It's very much more heavily on the geometric side. If you start looking, zoom in here, you start seeing the numbers of squares and how they show up in so many different places. I mean, we have obviously these big sets of squares that sometimes are tumbled diagonally, but you have them on the inside, you have them straight here, you've got them here, 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 here. I mean, the whole drawing's going to be green by the time I'm done drawing all the little squares that he has. Sometimes they're a little hidden. And it just, you've got, yeah, here we are. There, I could go on all day. There's a square back here.
Well, I think it's just you can see down below here too how he has the squares, but then he draws lines going across diagonals.
Yeah,
that then creates this
other
diagonal
squares. Yeah, because we have a square there too. Yeah. So you're getting this wonderful display of squares, but you also have the circles everywhere. And the other thing that I find really interesting about this one is if you scoot really far in, you can see in this square, we have possibly seed germs. So that is plate 11. Plate 12 is interesting. Let's let that zoom in there for a second. Because remember, at several points, the very, very beginning of the essay, we have remember the seed germ, his little drawing. Oh, Rob's going to pull it. They can't see that.
They can't. You should draw it on top of that.
Well,
this one.
Oh, okay. So at the very beginning of this whole book is this little drawing of remember the seed germ. And then it comes up again 2 or 3 other times. He has this little drawing, sometimes with an axis vertically, sometimes horizontally. But it makes a little pattern that goes, oh, I got to get my pencil on here. It makes a little pattern that goes like this. We've got a germ and a shape, and a germ and a shape. Now, put on the screen. Do you see the seed germ? So in this one, I'll erase this part here so you can see it again, but all of a sudden we can see this leaf shape here and this leaf shape here is a seed germ. And what happens? It flowers.
Yeah.
And if we don't start
and the leaves grow out as well.
And the leaves grow out from it. And it's everything is that Sullivan is telling us is all over this one drawing. And had we not read really carefully, we might not have noticed that. The other thing I like to bring in as close as I can here is this detail at the bottom. I love it when Sullivan has this really organic shapes and forms, and then he throws in architecture. This looks to me like it's part of, the frieze of a building, or it's chiseled into stone there, where the rest of it is just life forms, it's plant material. But this part here is either in a stone or it's in a building of some sort. And I always love to see his signature down at the bottom, and he always dates everything. That's always wonderful to see too. No, get rid of that one. So then that takes us to plate 13. Let's zoom in a little bit here. And this one, remember we had Awakening of was it the Pentagon? Before we got, before we got to our essay on parallelism. Well, this one, I like to call the Awakening of the Square. And I'll draw again on it so we can start. We did this two plates before this, but this number of squares. And this time he keeps these squares really quite interestingly rigid. We've got a whole nother set of squares here. And then there's one here. And what I love is that he's got these squares are the shape and the form behind everything. And of course, you've got little ones up here and here and here and here and here. And he often leaves these. Oh, and then we've got the diagonal versions. He's got these all with these little frames around them, so we can really start seeing the actual geometry of it and not necessarily the floral part of it. But then within it, the floral happens quite extensively as each of these squares becomes part of the plant material. I hesitate to actually continue drawing, or the whole thing is going to be green, and you won't see any of Sullivan anymore. But there are squares everywhere. And that's not even beginning to talk about, oh, I see I left this one out and this one. This is not even talking about the beginnings of the circles. So if I erase all these and back this up, you'll start to see all of the patterning that happens. You'll see it more clearly. You'll see these frames around all the squares, and you'll be able to kind of visualize the structure in the drawing. And then it almost allows you to better appreciate the flowering that happens within each of these. Like, take a look at this square here, and I'll bring you up. Look at how this structure, there's a shape that comes right down through this drawing here and here. But there's this form that grows up, and once it gets inside of the square, and that's where all the growth happens. And just take a look at the floral pattern, the leafing that happens within that one little square. And he never leaves the geometry behind because he still has his axis in there. So when we take a look back.
Oh, notice that's a whole bunch of nested squares. Right?
Oh, right next to it. Yeah, this is a nested rectangles inside. Yeah. But if you start following, like we did with drawings early on, if you start following the patterning and start noticing what's in front of what connects to what flows behind what, how does it grow from one spot to another, then these drawings become so much more depth in them, so much more content in them than when we just first look at them at the cursory look. So that's 13. Here's number 14. Now, my favorite thing about number 14, and I'm going to zoom in down here, is remember Sullivan's an architect. And what we have is we have a door opening. And if we zoom out just a little, we have an archway over that door structure. Like, here's the whole door structure. And so, oh, what did I just do? Ha! Sorry, everybody. Let me get to the right one.
You just went back. I
just went all the way back. That's 16. There we are. Okay. There you go. So he has, this is a door structure. So this is probably something from one of his ideas that came from some of his projects somewhere along the line. Architects, we tend to doodle. We have these ideas that kind of, we play with them. Sometimes we play with them from project to project to project. And they keep working their way into drawings. But I love the...
And this drawing is from 1922, and his last of his banks in Wisconsin was 1919. So it's only a few years after that.
Yeah. But what I like particularly, and let me just back up some of these lines so we can, it's going to make me erase them this time. All right, so let me erase all my green lines. What I love about this one is, I can't talk and erase at the same time. Isn't that funny? What I love about this one is how much, take a look, think of this as the doorway, and notice that as the doorway happens, you have the archway above it, but the plant material starts right down here and it grows up. This one kind of flowers in this area, and this one grows up here and flowers in this area.
Well, and then also continues to flower in this area, and this area, and this area.
Yeah, and then you have this form that, again, you have this intertwining, like this one here grows under, this one grows over. You just have this constant play of what's in front and what's in back, and that's what's giving you a lot of that depth in his work. But again, take a look up at this piece in close zoom. So take a look at our little leaf shapes. We have this spiral plant in the middle. How much does that look like some of the temple carvings that Rupali has been showing us. And notice how they grow off like this, like an unfurling plant, each piece slightly behind the next, swirling outward. And how each one of those comes to this leaf shape. And each one of these further grows out from that. And it's just this, you know, how plants, when they grow up, and they have a bud shape and they're packed in tight in this little bud shape. When they open, they tend to spiral open and the leaves curl out from that. And I find it absolutely fascinating that we have that exact same patterning happening in these kinds of drawings that are obviously intended to be ornament in architecture. And that is number 14. And here we have number 15. Now, I already have some drawings left on this one because I'm going to zoom in down here to the text. And you might not still be able to read the text. So I'll read it to you. It says here, note, the energy comes from the characteristic seed-germ imagined. The main stalk then differentiates into 8 specialized leaf forms, which in turn differentiate. There being no limit to the character expression, this design lies within the realm of romance. So before we met here today, I decided to sit down and find 8 leaf forms. And honestly, I think there's way more than 8, but I have at least 8 characterized in here. And I'll erase them so you can see them as we go. I'll start over here on the lower right, where I've got this shape where we've got this remember, these are specialized leaf forms. So this is that kind of plant shape where you get, I think like a hickory would grow like this, where you've got one branch and then multiple leaves that come off of it. And then we have this one here. I can zoom into that one. You have kind of a curved triangular shape with spikes that come off of it. And then up here, we have this leafy one. You see how those leaves kind of...
It's like grass stalks.
Almost like grass stalks in there. You see that one? We come over to this one in the very middle, which to me is all the world like a holly leaf. And there's multiple ones in this area where you've got this generally oval shaped leaf, but there's spikes on every single one. Coming up a little further, we have our general nice rounded, it's a slight oval, but it's a rounded leaf shape that's quite a simple leaf shape. Now, that to me is like that's a more stretched out one, but those are like aspen leaves or something like that. We come over to this one where it's a little more of an oval shape, and you tend to get maybe it's a dogwood leaf, something like that. And then up here in the corner, we have a more, sometimes that's more of a flower shape, that kind of long stretch, but you have these leaves that have multiple sections that come off of them that are nice and pointy. And then over here, I'm going to erase this one. And I think you might once again remember the seed-germ. See that? We have the 2 cotyledons stretching out, and that initial growth happening in between the 2 cotyledon forms, the leaf shapes. So that was at least 8, and I've just kind of barely begun in there. There's so much happening in this one. At first glance, to me, this looks like thistle, you know, where you've got that sort of bulbous shape and then all these little spikes off of it. But if you look in here, you've got pentagons, or is it hexagon? 1, 2, 3, pentagons.
Not sure it might be hexagon. I think that
it comes down to those leaf form, and then it's almost like each part grows off from that. And then that is number 15. Now,
still got a ways to go.
Yeah, 16. 16 is really interesting because it's different than some of the others that he's been showing. Again, I like to look at the geometry underneath it first. And we've got a distinct line here and a line here and a line here. And if you watch, you've got a J shape that connects those two and a J shape that connects those two. But then that's where you get, remember that was it number 10, where you have almost like the caduceus shape, where you've got the twining that happening around the axis. Notice here you've got an axis that comes around on that one and an axis that comes around on that one. And you have that same thing, but they're branching off in kind of a J shape, one after another. It's quite a spectacular one. And then you look in the detail of these, and again, you're seeing squares upon squares, and you're seeing almost these exploding leaf shapes where they're in great depth, that almost you can imagine them carved in stone with shadows undercut from underneath them.
I think they also kind of look a little like sprockets too.
Like sprockets. They do look like sprockets. I like that. Then number 17 here, I like to call this one the awakening of the hexagon, because we've had the square and we've had the pentagon. So it makes sure that we should have one of every shape, right? So this one, to me, looks more complete than others. And to me, I think this might have been and the reason I say this is because if you take a look at the date, this is a little earlier than some of them. I think this might have been part of a proposed project at one point. It feels a little more completed, and you can see again, all of the architecture lines are in here. You can see the rigid geometry and all of its construction lines marked right through everything. And you can follow those geometry pieces. Yeah, you can follow the geometry deeper and deeper in. And if we go all the way in, there's quite, I mean, I'd end up making there's so many layers of it as we go in. But one of the things I'm going to pull out here and show you, what I like about this one, we have the big square, we have the hexagon that's breaking out, remember, breaking out and breaking in. We have the breaking out of the square, and we have this very distinct circle in the middle. And if you look at that circle, you'll see, I'm going to zoom in so you can see it. You have what looks like a plant that is growing out from inside that circle. So it's coming from behind the geometry through the circle, and then that is what forms all of the floral pattern.
These radiating lines.
All these radiating lines with plant growth that come off of them. If you look carefully, they all start from within that circle, growing out of that first stem that grows up, and then the 4 forms that grow from it. And they fill in all of the geometry. Oops, let me get rid of that line. Scribbling all over books. Okay, this is number 18, and we definitely have our parallels again, our parallel lines that are growing into circles and squares. This one starts to, I can really start to see the influence that Sullivan's work had on Frank Lloyd Wright. And when you see this section right here, especially, where you've got all these lines, this to me starts looking very much like Sullivan's stained glass work, or not Sullivan, Wright's stained glass work of hollyhocks and of the tree of life and of wheat shafts. They have those slightly curving horizontal lines that stack on top of one another. Again, here we're getting very geometrical, especially down in the bottom, very geometrical structures that are completely filled in with plant forms. And then let me bring you to here. This one also looks very finished to me. Well, I mean, they all do, because I mean, Sullivan is just an amazing draftsman. This one is a circle with a 6-pointed star. And of course, the 6-pointed star is always part of a hexagon. And you can see that structure in here. And if you go inside, you can see it again and again. So this hexagon is breaking out, or the hexagon, the star, the 6-pointed star is breaking out of its hexagon. And again, this is another, you were going to say something?
Go ahead.
This is another time when you want to zoom in closely, because if you remember, Rupali giving us some beautiful tours of Indian temples. This center of this one especially reminds me of some of those temples that were carved out of marble, where the ceiling structures would be lacy and delicate. This reminds me so much of that. And if you look within each of these forms, you have sort of a stretched pentagon. It's really connecting back into itself elsewhere. But every one of those contains its own life form and its own filled full of life. And then let me pull you back out. And then that is number 19. I think this is probably the latest of them, 6/11/23. So I have those. We went over those dates one other time. But the very last plate here, when we bring it in here, this is actually from 1923, March of 1923. And it's one of the fainter ones. It's hard to get a picture of it. And there's not as much dark and light contrast in it. And this one took me a little bit longer to really kind of wrap my head around. But, you know, it's as Sullivan has written up here at the top, finis, the ending. Of course, it's Sullivan. It's going to say something deep and profound. So it's worth taking the time to look deeply into it. And of course, we have our vertical axis. Of course, we have some plant form that's growing up. And, you know, maybe if you look closely, you can see a sort of cotyledon sort of branching out on the side. But what really happens is, if we look on the inside here, is we have a starburst. We have a very strong central figure here of a flower that's in all of these little bursts. And each one of these is growing outward. And what happens is, as they grow out, you have a plant form happening in each one. And you can see there's sort of another seed pod. And each one of these has like a seed pod and 2 cotyledons, seed pod, 2 cotyledons, all the way around. And what you see is you've got curves here of the beginning of the starburst. And then you have this curving pattern here of its next row out. And to me, this looks like the dandelion. You know how the dandelions, they start with a starburst, and those are the seeds that you see way out on the outside edge, and they're all like little cups of little airy feathers almost. And when the dandelion is ready to set its seed, it makes that starburst shape. And then a big wind comes along and it blows those seeds everywhere, to set seed everywhere that it can. And I think that is what Sullivan is telling us here. And I wanted to leave it here for you to take a step from here with what you were talking about. Do you want me to keep this up, or do you want to?
Yeah, keep it up. Keep it up. I'm going to go back to something else from earlier that I think connects to this. And that was something he said. Where is it? It wasn't, it was after the awakening of the Pentagon. Ah, yeah, the values of parallel axes. And this is what, plate 7, all the way back in plate 7. But I'll just read it to you here. He says, thus we come upon the truth that the creative reality of form lies within a continuous series emanating from a single primal life impulse, seeking and finding manifold expression in form. Life itself is thus manifested as a constant flow into countless multitudes of specific forms. And this, I think, is sort of buried here as this little illustration, a little caption on some illustrations. But this is really goes to the essence of what he's trying to, of the whole message, I think, of the entire book, which is this idea that, you know, the life impulse, life manifesting itself in a constant flow into countless multitude of specific forms. And I think there's a reason why this is plate 20. This is the last one, is that that's what you're seeing. Yep. A life impulse bursting out and manifesting itself in different forms. So you have, can I draw?
Oh yeah, only give you, there you go.
I give you the pencil. So you start here in the middle, and you have a starburst that comes out of the middle. And then it goes off, and it goes off, and it goes off. But notice that some of these form new centers that then go off, and a new center here from here that goes off and off and off. And so, and then up here you go off in different directions. So what you're seeing is a starburst that goes outward forms new centers of energy from which another starburst occurs. And that you have it unfolding in this way, almost like it's like the Big Bang, right? It's an explosion of energy going off in different directions, leading to further explosions of energy that fill everything up. And that's what he's saying. This is what life is. It is a life impulse spreading out in all directions and creating new explosions of energy emanating out from that. So I think that's why this is plate 20 in the book, because it's summing up in visual form. And that's what, you know, what struck me about this thing, that he ends with, you know, let's have 10, or I think it's 11 plates of just stuff, and you go look at that and you get the rest of my message, right? And that's what he's telling you, and that's how he's doing that. So that's why he ends on that one. This is the essential message, the emanation out of the life force.
And I think also it's that if you dig in to Sullivan's ideas, we ourselves become that seed that spreads the ideas further.
Mm-hmm. That was brilliant. Rob, thank you. That, I think, sums up, you know, that's a great way of summing up everything that Sullivan is doing. And Sherri, this wonderful idea of actually taking this on iPad, isn't it? It's just a great device where you could just put it, because otherwise you're scared to touch that, you know. Touch the plates.
Yeah, you can't do that to the actual drawings, but if you take a photograph of the drawings, you can scribble all over them and just magically erase everything.
Exactly. And also
no damage done.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing about this, you know, this technology, you can draw it, and then you can say, okay, now I'm going to erase it. Now I'm going to show you something else. Now I'm going to show you something else. Yeah. And that something else is so large in Sullivan's case that you can just take this one little thing and show what is going on. All right, next, let's go to Rupali, and then we will have a discussion on this, and then we'll open up. Go ahead, Rupali.
Yeah, I'm going to read a passage from the interlude. Louis Sullivan says, it is to this diaphanous, labile logic of instinct, ever operative and perceptible as processes involving certitude and finality, that the free spirit of man inclines through sympathy of life. Such considerations open to view a still larger domain of parallelism, namely the parallelism between man and nature and between man and his works. These are self-contained within all-embracing domain of life, the universal power or energy which flows everywhere at all times, in all places, seeking expression and form, and thus parallel to all things. Man stands, by virtue of his powers, a solitary ego within a universe of energy, a witness, a participant, and by virtue of his powers, a co-creator. his creations are but parallels of himself. And he continues to say, therefore, what this work in that.
Rupali, can I ask you for a favor? Can you increase your volume? You are a little too low.
Sure. So he says, therefore, what this work may lack in scientific continuity of gradual illustration must be compensated by continuity in sensibility and thought by the student, meaning us. These illustrations may be traced back to their primitive origins, or primitive origins may be followed in their expanding development. So I'm going to take it from there that, he's talking about our work as the reflection of our values, of who we are. And he's really inviting us through these plates to say, let's look at nature. Let's look at what, we've studied Bhagavad Gita, we've studied the Bible, we've studied the Tao, and we can call it God or we can call it nature, but whatever has the power to create, from nothing comes something. We talked about that last week, that how these ideas, amorphous ideas, come together, and then we express it in a form that is conceivable to the human being, to that person. And that's the power that we as humans have. And using our imagination, I'm going to go back to what he says, sitting on the power of instinct, which sometimes we forget that because we are so caught up in the logical, the part of the intellect, that we are looking at what makes sense just through sensory inputs. He's saying, let's use all our powers to create. And so he's inviting us in the next 10 plates to use our sympathy for life and saying, use your imagination and use these to see what is possible. And I was just, I couldn't stop. I couldn't choose one plate. I could have gone and done all of these. And Sherri, thank you for doing it in such a simplified manner. I did take Sherri's suggestion, and actually Louis Sullivan does invite us to do the same, that he says, you can go back, to its primordial roots and see where is this coming from. So let me share my screen, and I'm going to talk about the last plate. So this is, to me, this is like the starburst, and everything saying, yes, this is life. It's ever expanding. You can take any node and go along that direction. So I chose to work on this, and since Rob has already talked about it, I'm not going to elaborate too much. Here is what I started with. I was actually, I thought that it started with the center, the circle over here, but I was very surprised when I started to trace the inorganic forms. I realized that there were two circles, and it wasn't really, that wasn't the center, because the center of these two circles are here. Clearly, there is this vertical axis that we see in the drawing. And then when you draw these two circles, and you have this other two diagonals going through it, you get this shape in the middle. And that's really where you have this circle, from where Sherri talked about the flowering starburst. So it's not really the center of the two circles. And so now you see those two circles are like the cotyledons that Sherri has pointed out. That's the seed-germ. And in this center, the elliptical form is the seed germ where you have the power. That's where the center circle sits, from where you have the radiating petals. And then these two circles, the larger circles, have their own centers. Those are two nebulae, again, going forth in their own direction. And we've talked about parallel axis. So if you look at the horizontal axis, we see so many axes as we go up. And at every intersection, there is a node. And as I was drawing this, I was thinking, this is brilliant, because every intersection, there is efflorescence. And he takes, a very simple inorganic form, the circle, and then encompasses that into a triangle. And then those triangular, the sides of the triangles become the parallel axis. And so if I go back to the original, we see here are the two circles. Inside is the starburst from where all energy is emanating. And then you have the vertical axis, which is held together by these angular lines that all bunch together at the center, at the base. That's like the root holding the entire tree up. I have a tree in our neighbor's yard, actually. It's a bush that has red leaves in the fall. It's all red. And in the fall, all you see are those red leaves. You don't see the branches. You don't see the form of it. And now in winter, all those leaves are gone. And you see the branches stemming out from the base, which just holds everything together. And that's how I thought about this work. That the reason it's all held together is because there's the unity in all the parts of this drawing. And so if I go further, I as I was walking towards the meeting, I just was holding my paper upside down. And if I look at this upside down, it still has a very stable form. And it looks like, this sitting on this heart-shaped base. The entire structure is sitting on this heart-shaped base. It just reminded me, that each of these little diamonds that are created become the next form to explore. And if we go back, we can see those diamonds are those leaf forms. There's this bigger form in the middle, and then there's like a crowning glory at the end. Something just, it reminded me of, Shrikant can sing this properly, and it just, here it is, here's another one. It's just, it's delicate filigree. It reminds me of, now I'm doing my Christmas decorations, so it reminds me of these leaves that, the filigree of the veins of the leaves that we have. Every leaf shape has that filigree, and between the veins, it has something else going on. And that's how I look at these round shapes on the side. Very, very delicate. It also, so I really enjoyed this process. And I think that every architecture student should just do this, to learn how to take the inorganic to the organic. Let me just stop share for a second and I'll come back to it. But since I'm doing my Christmas decorations right now, I am surrounded with by these snowflake shaped ornaments. And this plate reminds me of the snowflake ornaments. So let me share my screen again. So Sherri, this was similar to what you were doing. So just like Sherri was showing, here are the two cotyledons with the seed germ just bursting out to its full fruition, and then other leaf shapes. And you see the same kind of shape going on to it with the base over here. But as I said, it reminds me of snowflake designs that have the similar kind of bursting out from a geometric shape. Here's another example of an ornament that we can look at. And then when Louis Sullivan says, look at nature, so I have these golden pine cones, and you can see the geometry in the pine cone. You can see the curve, the spiral. And what Sherri showed before was in one of the plates, let me see, I think it was plate 11, where the two, on the horizontal axis, you have the two round drawings of like the base of a flower or the base of the pine cone going outward. And then if you look at it in elevation, you see the same spiral in its form going upward, right? So in nature, you see that the object is true to its origins or true to its design. And what Louis Sullivan is telling us is to live life in the same manner, that be true to your values, be true to what you believe in, and then you make sure your work shows that, so that you're in harmony with yourself and thus in harmony with nature. So he's saying, look at nature, learn the principles from nature, use your imagination and take it to the next level. Use this to create a society, use this to create a civilization that is striving for harmony. And I think it's, a very short book, but very powerful in what he's trying to convey. It's his entire message in just a few pages. So I'd like to read from Kindergarten Chats. He ends with the spring song, and he says, the spring is singing her gladsome song. Hear it, all my lad. Hear its diapason. Hear the splendor of its flow. Remember it forever. There surely will be another spring. Arise, you shall prevail. There surely will be a springtime. Come into the garden of the heart. You shall prevail. Then will come beauty. Then will come power. Then create. You shall prevail. Be not self-shamed, as spring is not self-shamed. Be virile to the end. And so he's inviting us, in all his books, he's inviting us to do more. He's inviting us to look at his work. He's inviting us to look at nature and say, how do you want to create? And that's the learning for us. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. All right. So we've got about an hour. So I want to talk about this book. So I want to right now talk about two themes. One, after looking at, what Rob and Sherri did, and one after looking at what Rupali did. And then I invite anybody to kind of comment on it further. So it's really interesting, how many patterns are here. You were, Rupali, you were talking about, seeing this tree in summer full of leaves. The internal structure you can't see, you see the leaves, but the internal structure is there. and that is actually behind all of this growth. And then in winter, the leaves are gone and you see the structure. So this is the dance of the organic and inorganic too, that there are some natural limits that are there, which are inorganic, within which the organic growth is taking place. And you can go and focus on one or the other, but both of them are kind of interacting with one another in order to see what we are seeing. So this kind of dance of the organic and inorganic axes and the efflorescence interacting with one another. Efflorescence sometimes overwhelms the axis, so you don't see the axis, but then you can see that, oh, this is the line. So there is this tremendous growth. And I want to now, for the second point, I want to take up something about that efflorescence itself. What Louis Sullivan does is that he's always acting on universal principles. I think somewhere in the autobiography of an idea, he says, I came to a conclusion that only the ideas that are universal are worth anything. Everything else, if you don't get that, you don't have anything. And that is behind the unity in the tremendous diversity of forms. Because even if you take one of the plates, it has all these, in one of the plates that Sherri showed, she showed these different kinds of leaves. Now, these different kinds of leaves actually do not exist in nature in a single arrangement, but he brings them together and they all work together. Why is that? Because he's thinking in terms of universal principles, and he's seeing those particular forms as manifestations of that universal principle. So he's always going back and forth. He's saying yes to the particular. He has love for the particular, and he has love for the universal or the infinite. He has love for the finite and the infinite. And he's saying yes to both of them. He's kind of bringing the finite and the infinite together, the universal and particular together, and not seeing one without the other, always going back and forth. And as a result of it, he has this cornucopia of many, 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 many different ideas of parallelism. There is superimposition. There is, this nesting. There is overlapping. There is combinations. So all these forms that he has actually work together instead of producing a cacophony of diverse things. The forms that he has are such that they integrate with other forms that he has. And that is because he's operating on universal principles. So it is like saying yes to, put it in Taoist terms, it's saying yes to the earth and to the heaven at the same time. And you're going back and forth between earth and heaven all the time. That's the idea that I see here. And that's the thing that makes possible this infinite variety. It's like, Darwin, talking about this tremendous richness of life, and then being able to see a principle that runs through it. And each actually accentuate the beauty of the other and the power of the other. So that's what I wanted to say. But now would love to hear anybody else commenting on anything about the book or anything. Go ahead.
Can I add something onto what you were saying there? You talking about this, that it occurred to me as you were saying that all of Sullivan's plates, really all of his ornament and all of his architecture always combine this strong, quite evident geometry and this flowering of detail. And the two are always deeply combined and intertwined that you cannot pull them apart. And it reminds me so much of what he talks about when he's talking about man's powers and talking about, and this comes up in autobiography, it comes up in kindergarten chats, about that we can't be all intellect or all emotional, that it's a combining of the two that makes us powerful. And I think that really is what we see in his architecture and his ornament and in his words, in his poetry, that he's combining the two always. We see that logic in the geometry, we see that intellect in that's sort of holding that emotional, that flowering, that poetry. They always are deeply intertwined and you cannot pull them apart.
Wonderful. Thank you. I mean, this is exactly opposite of Platonism.
Yes.
And it is exactly opposite of subjectivism, or kind of materialism, of simply saying, okay, these are the concrete things that I have, that's all I have, and I'm trying to do something with that without being able to see any patterns in that, where you're just focused on that. Or you're going in this kind of Platonic geometry where you have the forms, but they never really touch the ground. They never really, whereas he's able to go between them, because the Platonic idea is that you're saying, look, there are these two separate worlds. You can be here or you can be here. Some people choose this place, some people choose this place. But what he's doing is that he's saying, no, it's one thing. And there is an order to it in the sense that the universal principles come first. He's able to create this integration in the perceptual because he has a true universal principle that runs through everything. And it's not, the autobiography of an idea is his description of the journey, how he got to that. And then, coming, form follows function. That's what, that's one formulation of his idea of that. Or a solution contains, a problem contains its own solution. Oh, so wonderful. Anybody else? Jeannie, go ahead.
Well, first I want to thank you because you saw many things that I didn't see, all three of you. So, but at any rate, I started with the drawings on Xerox, and I put them up on a window, and then you can see from the back. Now, what happened there was, whoops, that's not what I want to do. I want to show my camera. There it is. So, you could see all these little dots, which you really can't see in the drawings, and I was surprised by that.
We're seeing.
I know. You haven't seen
okay, okay, there it is. Okay, perfect.
So, this is plate 8, and I think Sherri covered this, but I see crosses with parallel lines. I see the triangles predominating, and that forms the eye of God up there. Then I saw the open triangles form feet and or roots. And then these triple curves, whoops, oh. And then the triple curves form wings so that the thing can fly up. So that's what I saw in plate 8. On plate 12, I saw axes and parallel lines, nested arcs forming the bud, and with this, this is the mother and father here. So the male and female parts. The embryo down here reaches up for life, And it also flies with these two arcs here. And this inverted triangle is like a new life. And then these spirals that are at the bottom are like vegetative growth. That's what I saw on that. This is plate 10. So circles can't be parallel, but the equivalent are, you know, having nested circles, you can either make them concentric like this or translate them like this. And he has both of those in here. The lines that are radiating from a circle also can't be parallel, but that's an equivalent. I mean, they're like they're parallel, but they're not really parallel. And then there's four symmetries: translation, which is a movement; rotation, which of course you all know; reflection, you know, is turning back to front or whatever; and then scale. And then there are other symmetries that are made from these four. So one of them is the glide reflection, which is down here. So it's a combination of a reflection and a translation. And then you have a scale and a translation, which you see here. So it's moving, but there's 4 different sizes. So let me just pick up my other one that fell down. Whoops. All chaotic and everything here. Did I show this one? This is what I showed. Okay, 1, 2, 3. This is the last one that you guys did as well. Both of you did this, and you can see how many different ways you can do it. So I see an ellipse made from 2 circles, which is, you know, follows what Rupali found too. And then the radiating symmetry, that's rotational. This truncated ellipse at the back, at the bottom, creates gravity. And that makes the whole thing into an object that lives in the world. So you have a vase and a bouquet, and Rupali saw this too, and a crown over it. That's what I saw with that. Now, let me see here. I wanted to show you a little bit of what I thought of the seed 3D. Come back, come back, come back. Oh, please come back. Okay.
Go back.
So I'm back. Sorry. And I'll tell you, I did not know you could draw on an iPad because that's what I'm on, but I'm very excited about that new news. So anyway, Shrikant was saying, you know, how do you artists build? This was the last time about building with, you know, 3D objects. And, you know, why don't we use more polyhedras and so forth? So for artists, you like to use a cylinder, and a cone is a good thing. And, you know, you can put those 2 together, form a little mushroom. But artists use spheres a lot, and you can build lots and lots of things out of spheres as your basic shape. Now, this little shape you may not recognize. But it's a kind of tetrahedral shape that it's deflated. So just as a sphere is as inflated as you can get, this isn't a totally deflated, but it's starting to be quite deflated. And in 3D, your minimal surfaces are not always flat. There's sometimes curves that are involved with that. So this shape, I'll call it a tetrahedron, is actually the space in between 4 spheres. So I get the other sphere. So that's a matter of seeing things. We are so strongly inclined to see the figure and lose the ground. So another exercise might be to look at all the things that are in the ground of these drawings as well as what's in the figures.
Wow.
Thank you.
Jeannie, that was brilliant. I loved you going through the slides, you know, all the slides and saying, okay, you know what, this is the figure that I see within. I mean, that going back and forth from the skeleton to the full body and back and forth, and having that facility to do that, I think is crucial to how Sullivan thinks. The second thing I found really fascinating is, and this is something that you've done throughout, is to take something 2D and show us what the equivalent of that looks like in 3D. Because I think that's, yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
There was one more thing I wanted to show you about the spheres, is that this is a process called truncation. So a sphere can be truncated into all your regular polyhedra. So that's why often you don't see artists starting out with a polyhedra. They'll start with a sphere and then truncate where they need it.
Yes, and see, look, this is such a rich topic, because look at what I want to show you. What I want to talk about is transformations, right? You talked about the transformations in the 2 dimension of rotation, translation, and then you talked about having the facility where you can combine both of them. So you have like this one, and then instead of it being here, you just move it up, and it creates one kind of pattern. Even this action of yours of cutting that off is a transformation. And that done in a systematic way produces all kinds of results. And then there are other transformations in 3D, which you build on. So it's just so fascinating to see, you know, these elements and how those elements are combined to produce this tremendous variety. You know, you look at, when you see a completed result of a process, you are struck with the fecundity and just the sheer complexity of what you're seeing. But when you also familiarize yourself with the principles and transformations that are the units of production of such a thing, you actually get a much deeper appreciation of what it is. Thank you, Jeannie. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Yeah, I would just say, Jeannie, that was beautiful, very nicely explained. I think that what Louis Sullivan is saying, you know, is if you are going back to the universal principles and you are in harmony with nature as you create your work, and when I say nature, I mean the universal principles, then it doesn't matter which geography, which religion, which time period, those creations become eternal. They last forever because they are following those principles. So when we look at the temples that we looked at before, or Louis Sullivan's works, or we look at some of the old Greek architecture, those buildings have that quality in them, which is why they survive over generations. We can say the same thing about literary work. We can say same thing about music, other creations of the human mind. I think it has its own life force that continues to live. It just doesn't die.
Wonderful. Now, let me ask a question to everybody. What did you get from going through this book? What was it like? Any, you know, this is, I would like each of you to talk about it, because it's going to be a different perspective. Go ahead. Who would like to go first? Rob.
You don't mind my going first. Well, first of all, I want to say I really liked Rupali's sort of geometric drawing, analyzing the elements of that the plate 20. That was really eye-opening. And I like the fact, and I like Jeannie's too, because I like the fact that we all looked at it and got something a little different out of it. So that it shows the richness of it, that there's a lot in there. The main thing I got is that I have to say I was initially skeptical. I was like, oh, Shrikant, I know you're this big Sullivan fanatic, but this tiny little book. It's like this thick. How could we possibly spend this many weeks on it? And there was a lot more in there than and it was a lot more of it was what you actually billed it as, which is it's a manifesto about Sullivan's view of life and not just techniques for creating architectural ornament. So that's what I got out of it, that you were right, that there was a lot in there and that we had a lot to discuss.
Well, I cheated, Rob, because it's a book about how do you use the universal principles, which have the infinite potentiality to manifest these amazing finite forms. And actually, you can spend infinite amount of time on it, and you'll still not, cover it. So
I'm not committing to an infinite number of meetups.
I know. I know. This is because this is not Meetup is too short a time. This is like infinite number of seconds you have to spend on it. All right, thank you. Who would like to go next? Sherri, what did you think?
I've totally enjoyed this because it was a chance for me to dig deeper. I've looked at these plates so many times over the decades, but I've never had the opportunity to dig this deep into them, spend this much time thinking about them, and enjoying talking about them with such a great group of people who are equally excited about digging deeper into this subject. So it has been just a joy for me. And I see so much more than, it's amazing. You can look at something 100 times and then you can look at them 101 and it's a richer observation that last time, and it's growing even more. So there'll be more than 100 more times.
Yes, no, exactly. While talking about books, I don't know who it was that said it. I read it somewhere. I read too many books. So they were saying most books are not worth reading. Like most books are not worth reading. Most books are worth just kind of, flipping through to see if there is anything. Then there are some books which are worth reading. Some books you need to really reread all your life, and they will keep giving you more and more.
Yeah.
And Sullivan's works are in that category. I don't know whether I'm just so far down as compared to he that I find this every time I read it, it's like completely new. In the first meetup that Yasuhiko attended, his comment was that I could read this essay, the opening essay, every day for the rest of my life, and I would get radically new things every time. And that's exactly what it is. That's the power of the book. Thank you. Rupali, what did you think? And then Jeannie.
Yeah, so I think the work that we had done before, reading Kindergarten Chats and Autobiography of an Idea, was really helpful in preparing to reading this book. Because in those two books, Louis Sullivan elaborates everything that he's saying in a very concise manner in this book. So that was very helpful. What I really enjoyed is really understanding what is the human potential, understanding what makes us human. In one of her books, I think it's The Formation of Man, Maria Montessori says, just because we are born in the form of a human being does not make us human. That's not being human. It is only when you realize your potential and you create and you participate in the world, then that's what makes you human. And I think I really understood that as I was going through this book. The second part is, what kind of education do we need to make sure that we are not just doing what we are told, but we are allowed to think and to have the freedom and choice. I think those were, I don't think I quite understood what he meant by democracy when I read Kindergarten Chats, but now I really understand that it's that ability to choose and to have that freedom. And I did a workshop with educators recently, and I asked them to do a very simple exercise. I said, let's take a piece of paper and create something that you can rest your cell phone on, because everybody has a cell phone. I've done this with students, I've done with other educators, and people usually do it. But this group was very surprising. They said, what do you want us to do? And I said, I want you to use your imagination. And they could not do it. Only maybe 4 or 5 people could come up with a design to hold there, because they wanted to be told. And these are people who were doing really well in their school, but they were always doing what they were told, and they were studying for exams. Louis Sullivan is saying, don't do that. You have the ability to figure out things for yourself. And I think this book really tells us how to do it. And he's inviting us to look at nature, which I'm just, I've always enjoyed being out and about in nature. And he says in Kindergarten Chats, go out in nature, learn from nature. The student is quite surprised at that invitation. But here in this book, you can see in each and every plate why he's telling you to go in nature. Why is he saying go back to the basic principles? So that was my second learning. And the third thing is, just as I was discussing the plates with Rohit, plates 10 to 20, and every plate we were drawing all these axes and looking at, oh, look at how it's flowering here. Oh no, look over here, it's flowering there. And we were saying, oh my goodness, he was crazy to do this so much. And we were thinking, where was the level at which he operated, and how do we bring ourselves to that level? What kind of attention and what kind of work we need to do to bring ourselves up? And it wasn't just Einstein or Newton or Darwin or Louis Sullivan or Maria Montessori. We all have that potential in us. So how do we exercise our potential? So that was an eye-opener for me. It was really wonderful.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rupali. On that point, I'm just going to shoot my mouth here. But the thing that I find here, when I started out, I said, okay, look, I don't have ability to draw, so what am I going to do? But I think the simple thing is to get the principle right, and then just infinite iteration. There is a lot of iteration. It's like many times you find that the great people, they just have they get to the heart of the matter in terms of a principle of saying, this is what you need to do. And then they do it on a scale with discipline and just sheer amount of time, over and over and over and over again. And it kind of builds on itself. If it actually is a seed germ. This is not true for everything, but if you actually do get to a seed germ, then you do infinite iterations on that. I've found that you surprise yourself of what you come up with something and say, what? I never thought this was possible. Go ahead, Rupali.
I just wanted to add on that, when we're talking about iterations, and I want to go back to what he says early on in Kindergarten Chats, is that the role of the architect. And I think this would apply not just to the architect, but the role of human beings. And he says, we live in a society, we are social animals, right? So to create things that are in harmony, so that we can, when we are in those structures or when we are in those environments, that we are producing, we feel at peace, and we are not, you're not in a situation, you're not in an environment where it's kind of jarring. And I think for students, especially in architecture, they should do these exercises that Louis Sullivan is telling you to do, because then the works that we would create really would be for the betterment of civilization that he is urging us to create for.
Now, one other comment. I think I talked about positive things. I think you also there are negative things that stop you. Like, consider the fact that all these teachers who are Montessori teachers could not produce, which their 4-year-old kids can very easily produce. Okay, what is it that these 4-year kids have that these other people did not have? Or what is it that these people have, these teachers have, which these kids did not have? Because, or what is it that Sullivan has? He's communing with the universal principle. He's communing with nature, and then he's just expressing that without thinking about what will this person think about it? Is this the proper thing? There is no social metaphysics here of saying that, okay, what will other people say? Because that is the thing that freezes most people. Because saying, okay, I will, what if they don't like it? Kids don't have that. So it's that what they don't have, that's also, I think, a crucial component of this. All right, Jeannie, what did you think?
Well, I found Louis Sullivan absolutely uplifting. I think I had said before, when I studied him in school, I was in the back of the class and I didn't even realize he had ornamentation on those buildings. But architecture itself is one of the things that is awe-inspiring to me. When I stand in front of a monument or a piece of architecture, it is sort of the thing that we human beings are capable of is just enormous. And it's so impressive. And I felt similar to having seen the King Tut exhibit. When I saw that, much earlier in my life, I almost wanted to just give up doing art because everything was so meticulously done and so careful. And it was just going to be buried in a pyramid. It was all this work and what for? But it's the joy of living that is coming out when you see it. And the skyscrapers, many of them only last 60 years. And it's like all that work and then it's gone. But this is sort of the human condition of, what are you going to do? Stifle yourself because it's going to disappear, or allow yourself, like Louis Sullivan, to just blossom. And that was a very important message to me that I don't see very much in almost anybody anymore. The appreciation of what it is to be human and what we can do. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie. All right, so next year is the 100th anniversary of Louis Sullivan's death, and we have covered the core of his work. We have covered Kindergarten Chats, we have covered Autobiography of an Idea, and we have covered this one. And I agree with Rupali that this was the fitting last one to cover because it sits on the top of the ideas that are presented in Kindergarten Chats, the story of the development of the ideas in the Autobiography of an Idea. And this is like the grand demonstration of it, which sits on the top of it. So if any of you have any ideas about what individual meetups, I don't want to do a series, but any kind of individual meetup, just really highlighting something about Sullivan, let's talk and let's do meetups next year to celebrate. We can just sprinkle them across as and when we can do it. That will be a great way, because I want to now draw attention of people. See, I feel very strongly about this because I think his work has tremendous life-giving power, and it speaks to the mind and it speaks to the heart. It really does that spectacularly. And he's the father of the skyscraper. So it speaks to transformation of the world as well. So it is a really profound work. And I think, during his own time, he did not get enough credit for what he did. Remember that he is writing these books, all these books, at the end of his life, when the entire profession and the entire economy has rejected him. He is pretty much destitute. And he's producing all of this at the end of his life. Okay. It's not like, it's like we, each of us are in a much better position that he was when he was producing these things. Okay. So that's what he has done. And it's quite an achievement to leave such things behind in such conditions. Okay. Yes, Sherri, I like the idea. One of the things that Sherri's just texted me is that, we've looked at all these books, but he was an architect, and we should look at his buildings. That's what he built. So yes, absolutely. We can figure out a way to do that. We can do it in an innovative way. We can figure out what to do. So I'm open to that. We can just do, I can take it to the building here that we have, and we can do the meetup in the front of the building with a group of people right there, or we can be, and lots of things are possible. So please.
But did he ever think that his books would outlive his buildings? I think he probably thought his buildings were forever, but the books are going to be here for a long time.
That's a very good point. It's that's the power of the written word. Mm-hmm. That's the power of the written word, because the buildings, they have lifetime. They have lifetimes, and they are there only in one place. And you can be there only for a short period of time. This you can carry with you, in your library, and then in your heart and in your mind, all the time. So absolutely. All right. So I'm very excited about continuing to do things on Louis Sullivan. Go ahead, Sherri.
I just want to tie into Jeannie's comment there. I think the reason that he focused on writing at the end of his life is because he had the realization that the ideas hadn't gotten through. And so this was his way, I think, of putting those ideas out there one final time to make that seed take hold.
It's like, I built them in buildings and you people didn't get it. So let me spell it out for you.
Let me spell it out for you.
If you can't see, let me see if you can read.
Yeah, exactly.
He even says in the interlude that this interlude is necessary between my drawings, a literary work, to explain it to you. So.
Yeah.
All right. And the folks who are listening to this or watching this on YouTube, if you would like to if you would like to propose something, if you're familiar with Louis Sullivan, please write to us at 52livingideas@gmail.com. And we would love to have you join and present whatever it is that you have learned. Go ahead, Rupali.
I was thinking we could do poetry of Louis Sullivan.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a poet. And...
Yes. So we'll work on all of this, and we will do it on a not on a regular schedule, but we'll do when we can. But anytime you have ideas, just go ahead and text me, and we'll go ahead and keep working on it. All right, folks. So thank you so much. Rob, thanks for being here. I know it was, this is, you're least familiar with this, but I am very impressed with everything, including your drawings, actually.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll do more for the next one.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you, Sherri. And Rupali, I really like the fact that you brought in the Indian context, because it's such a different context from Louis Sullivan, and you can see the same principles
Very much, yeah.
being operative. So you can see the universality of principles. And Jeannie, thank you so much for showing us that the world is 3D. And we are going to actually look at least some buildings of Louis Sullivan to say that, okay, we don't just operate in 1D like a written line, 2D like a drawing, but also 3D. All right. Thank you very much, folks. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.